They're ready for you, David. Please begin.
Hey, good morning, and wow. So I'm going to start off with a few updates because I really want to get them out of the way. As it always, I don't know, it just bothers me to have to go into all of the updates and even the reasons why. So the prayer team conference calls, they're kind of what I'm saying are up in the air right now because I will no longer be joining them. I'm going to, what I normally do with the prayer team is send out a reminder, like every second Thursday, every other Thursday, there's a conference call, and I send out a reminder with an updated prayer calendar, not a prayer list really, but a prayer calendar. Because, you know, when you have, say, 100 people, right, to pray for, you're not going to get to pray for all of them, and you're not going to give them the individual specific time and focus that they each deserve. So what I do with the prayer team is I break it down on a calendar, and there's about 4 or 5 people each day of the month that need to be interceded for, that need intercession, right? So normally I update that every time I send out a reminder before a conference call. That's not going to happen either. It's going to be one prayer calendar per month to the prayer team only. It's not going to be posted anywhere on social media. The prayer team group on social media is going to be removed. I am trying to make things a little more simple to give other things more focus. Okay. So the prayer team themselves are open to use the conference call line anytime they want. It's open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's just one number. There's no code that needs to be entered, anything like that. So if the prayer team themselves want to get on there and say, hey, you know, let's do this, let's do that, that's on them. They can use the prayer conference call line anytime they want. It's available for them. I'm just not going to be partaking of the calls or updating the calendar any more than the once a month when I send it out. And I'm not going to be sending out reminders. So if anybody wants to join the prayer team, all they have to do is go to the website and click on the prayer team tab. I wonder if I can, let me see if I can just kind of show you real quick. All right. And it's open for anybody. So when you first go to the website, you might get this: subscribe to our e-newsletter and mailing list. You could do that if you want, but that's not the prayer team. Click on the prayer team tab and then put in your email and your first name. You don't have to put in your phone number. You can put in all zeros if you want. It's a required thing, and I couldn't figure out how to remove it. So that's how you get on the prayer team ministry mailing list. Okay. All right. So with that said, also, we have canceled our Restream subscription and will not be utilizing Restream anymore. So we are only going to be streaming on Facebook, YouTube, and our website. The website streaming is not being archived. Only the YouTube and the Facebook are. And we'll no longer be streaming on Twitter or Twitch or any of those other things. What else? Just some changes, right? So the newsletter has been one page front and back the last few times, and it's going to stay that way, at least for now, right? There's been, a lot of cancellations, a lot of invites that aren't coming in because of the nonsense that's going on in this world, right? And so because of this, things, they get a little tight, a little rough. No worries, of course, right? However, I'm also considering canceling the 3-day ministry outreach events that I was planning to put on the calendar this month. 3-day outreach ministry is Friday, Saturday, and Sunday in different areas, different towns or cities, and just an outreach for the LGBT. There was going to be one every month, July, August, September, October, because I haven't been able to do a lot of them, right, this year because of funds. But I'm not going to put any on the calendar because I can't schedule events when there's really no means to getting to the locations and or being able to fund, the accommodations, the travel expenses, etc. So with that said, before we jump into what I really want to talk about, we need some assistance. And I know that there's a small group of people, my brethren, my brothers and sisters that I love very much, and you support this ministry and you do a lot, right? And I do not expect anyone to give beyond their means. But unless this ministry can get some groups or some congregations or some more folks involved that are prepared to support the mission, then there's going to be even more changes that are going to be made. And the whole mission of having this safe place, this home for the lost to come and be discipled to, it may just be that, an idea and nothing more. And so speaking of that home, right, that goal or that focus that I spoke of yesterday, a home that would be a safe place for those who are seeking freedom from the identities that they've accepted. And we're going to get into some talking about this identity and these false identities that all of us take on, right? But the goal is to have a safe place from the streets or from the peer pressure or from the deviant acts, from the turmoil, from the clubs, from the scene, the strip, even from the daily harassment, which causes great pride. See, the daily harassment, the harsh words that come from those who haven't accepted homosexuality as their identity, those harsh words that come from them towards those who have accepted LGBT as their identity, it causes great pride because it's a rebellion. And it's the rebellion to those who try to belittle them with their words, their deeds, and their actions. That's where their great pride comes from. That's where their strong belief comes that they have to be proud of who and what they are. Now, and see, I don't want this home to be some program, right, where people come or send their loved ones off to be cured of homosexuality or even to be thought of as a recovery program. Because this is supposed to be a safe place, a place of hope, a place of hope where those who want that something more, right? Because they all know that there's something more, just they don't know how to obtain it. Some don't even know that it's obtainable. But that's what this home has to be. And that's what this whole, and I'm not going to call it a program because I don't like that word. So I don't want this to be something that's not. We have one commission. Our commission is twofold: evangelize and disciple. I want this to be a place where the evangelized can come and be discipled. Where those people that are seeking that something more can come to discover. See, it's not a recovery program. It's a discovery program where they can come discover their true identity in Jesus the Christ, right? Isn't that, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't that what we're called to do? We're called to? I mean, I know it feels good to go stand on the steps of the Supreme Court, right? It felt good to go and do that and to be a part of something. But it didn't feel like that's what I was called to do until what I was supposed to talk about, I pushed aside and just gave testimony. That's when it felt like I was doing what I was called to do. So this home is not going to be a place to quote unquote change, but it should be a place to be made whole, right? According to the master's plan, not my plan, not your plan, not our plan, the master's plan. Now, I was laying in bed this morning and I'm just, I'm the I want to know why kind of guy. So I like to try to figure everything out. And some things aren't to be figured out, I guess, right? So I'm laying in bed and I'm thinking about how's this even going to happen, right? What is it even going to look like if, and that's a big if, but if it does happen, what's it even going to look like, right? And I don't know. I mean, I have ideas. I have ideas of what it looks like as far as structure, right? As far as structure and then using the residue program. But I don't know what it looks like, right? Because I don't know if it's even going to be. But what I do know is I've been thinking a lot about all the arguments that we all hear and we all kind of looking at some comments. I'm going to go through the comments. Hopefully I remember, but there's so much I want to talk about. It's like a fire's been relit, right? And I know that there's all these arguments out there. So we all know the arguments. We've all heard at least one of them. And a lot of these arguments come from and stem from the false interpretations and the twisted scriptures, right? And they come from, and a lot of the other ones come from thoughts and feelings. Thoughts and feelings. What we think sounds good, or what feels good to us, or what doesn't feel good to us because we don't want to hurt somebody we love, right? So all kinds of arguments. But one of the arguments that I get a lot, and I just actually heard in the last couple weeks. I watched that movie, the Matthew Shepard story, And I also watched a movie called Save Me. And it's about a home that was actually, it's conversion therapy or reparative therapy, right? Many people know how I feel about that nonsense. But it was a home for young men to go and to beat addictions, including homosexuality. However, the structure of conversion therapy is nonsensical because Yeshua, Jesus the Christ, is conversion therapy. There is nothing outside of that or beside that, right? It's him and him only, Jesus only. So the argument that I heard in this movie was that Yeshua, Jesus the Christ, never said anything specifically about homosexuality, that he never condemned homosexual acts. And many even believe that when he speaks of eunuchs, that he's speaking of homosexuals and transgenders. And I have to say, he's not. Okay? He's not. But before I even get into whether or not Yeshua, Jesus the Christ, ever spoke about homosexuality or not, let me tell you of another divine appointment that the Father had for me while I was away in the last couple weeks. And only because I think it's relevant right now, especially. You know, not that long ago, I made a statement publicly on social media, and I believe in a video as well, that I'm not going to vote. I was like, I am not going to vote. I'm tired of I'm tired of trying to figure out and vote for the lesser of two evils and this and that, right? And so here I am, standing in a gas station, in a line at the gas station, and the guy next to me says, "Hey, I like your t-shirt." Now, I had on my not made in China t-shirt that day. And so we got to talking about all the nonsense and the chaos that's going on in our nation. And he was like, he was like the majority of people that are up there in the hills of Maine and up in northern Maine as well. Very conservative and super duper anti-democrat, right? And so the hills in the northern Maine, and Maine itself is a blue state. It's very, very, very left. However, a lot of people are being woke up to all of this madness and chaos going on, right? So this young man also tells me how he's a Christian. And not just a Christian, he said a child of God, right? Then we got to talking about how I came to the conclusion that I was tired of voting for the lesser of two evils. And so I was not going to vote this year. Because even though Trump may be anti-abortion, he's still pro-LGBT. And if he isn't really pro-LGBT, then that would make him a hypocrite for supporting the LGBT for Trump movement, right? It's politics. And so the dilemma for me was, if I'm even supposed to be putting forth an effort in voting when it's likely rigged anyway, and my vote probably doesn't truly count. So this young man, as we walk outside, right, we make our purchases, we take a walk outside, we're still talking. This young man tells me that he was in the very same place just weeks before. That he was in the very same frame of mind as I was. And he was reading his Bible one night, and he's praying on it, and he realized something. And he said it felt like it was just spirit-led. So he realized that he has an obligation to partake in the voting process fair or not because he's a Christian, but because he's an American. And so that's when he said he realized that he has to vote for the pro-American. And there's only one right now that is pro-America, and that it happens to be our current president, right? Because the left is very anti-America. They're anti-freedom. So this young man, he was also very adamant about how patriotism is a religion in and of itself. And I definitely agreed with him there, because I've said that exactly the way he said it. I've said it many times. But how he adores his country, but he loves his God. He loves God Almighty, but adores his country. And I'm like, wow, I never really thought about it like that. So politically, he said he feels like it's his duty to make sure his vote is made, valid or not. Because if not, then he would be bowing down to the left mafia, thinking they can scare Americans out of the polls with their wickedness. And I'm like, wow. He says, you know what? I know that I am just a passing through. But I'm here. I was blown away, right? So I'm blown away. I'm driving from place to place, like, from the mountain to the waterfall and all of this. And I'm just taking in all of this as I'm seeing all this beautiful scenery. I'm seeing the amazing creation, right? And I'm praying and I'm talking to the Father and I'm seeking his face and in all these matters, right? And all kinds of things that I'm pondering. And I came to the conclusion that if the Father crossed my path with that young man, then it was for a purpose. So after I thought long and hard, I decided that I was most definitely going to vote as an American. As an American, I wasn't going to try to put God, I'm not going to try to put Yahweh into something that he has been removed from long ago. But it was all about voting as an American, because I know, Tracy, that this is not my kingdom. But I'm here, and I'm here for a purpose. And if the Father wills that all men be saved in this empire, then I had better make sure that I do what I'm supposed to be doing. And this is maybe not for everybody, but I know he dealt with me on it. And I know a lot of us like to sit back and say, well, I'm just going to wait and see. I'm just going to wait and see if the Lord speaks to me on it, when this might be the Lord speaking to you on it. And I'm not saying that I'm the Lord and I'm speaking and he's speaking through me, but too many times I see too many people that come and say, well, I know I'm supposed to do this, but I got to wait and do this and wait for the Lord to speak. And I'm like, 20 people have already told you that you got to do this. Maybe the Lord has already told you and you just don't want to hear from him. So that's how I kind of looked at it in the whole process and being with him and meeting him and the whole purpose. So that's that, right? But I want to get back to whether or not Yeshua, Jesus the Christ, ever condemned homosexuality and what he was speaking of when he spoke of eunuchs. Okay. So I'm not even going to discuss the voting thing anymore, because that's where I stand. As an American, I'm going to vote. As an American, I'm going to vote because I refuse to bow down to the anti-American movement. And that's it. So, how many of you have heard somebody say, well, Jesus never talked about homosexuality, so it's not an issue? And there's a lot of debates over whether or not Yeshua, Jesus the Christ, personally condemned homosexuality, right? Because all the world hears is that he never specifically mentioned or specifically condemned homosexuality. So what we, as the children of God, right, what we, as the ones that are grafted in, should be desiring and seeking and speaking is the truth of what the word tells us, instead of the twisted meanings that the world is hearing, right? The truth. That's it. We must tell the truth, tell it in love, because we love, which is only possible because we were first loved. It's simple. So we can tell people that the reason there are debates over whether or not Jesus condemned homosexuality is because everybody wants to think and feel and lean on their own understanding. It's not entirely true, though. The fact that Jesus never specifically mentioned homosexuality is not entirely true. In fact, Yeshua most certainly did condemn homosexuality in the Gospels by simply affirming the Old Testament standard of marriage being between one man and one woman, as well as when he cited Old Testament references of condemnation where homosexuality was involved, like Matthew chapter 10, verse 15, when Yeshua, Jesus the Christ, says, truly I say to you, it will be more tolerable for the land of Sodom and Gomorrah in the day of judgment than for that city. So we know that homosexuality was involved in the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, right? Note, I said involved in, not the reason for the destruction, but homosexuality was involved in, because there was much more going on in Sodom and Gomorrah than just homosexuality, than just men laying with men and women laying with women. Much more going on. There was bestiality. There was even between a man and a woman, there was sodomy going on, which was oral or anal sex. Yep. Oral or anal sex. That's the definition of sodomy. It's oral or anal sex between a man and a man and a woman and a woman, or bestiality. And some believe that self-love or masturbation falls into that category, because the true definition is a crime against nature. So let's just get that out there, that homosexuality wasn't the only thing going on in Sodom and Gomorrah. And so sodomites are not just homosexuals. In actuality and technically, I think we'd all fall under the category of sodomite. At least before we were rescued or washed clean, right? So, in Matthew chapter 19, Let me get there. Jesus confirms. Okay? He confirms the one man, one woman marriage pattern. And we see that, let's say, beginning at verse 4. How about we do verse 4 through 6 first, right? So, and he answered and said, have you not read? See, okay, so the whole origin was, let me start from the beginning. When Jesus finished these words, he departed from Galilee and came into the region of Judea beyond the Jordan, and large crowds followed him, and he healed them there. Some Pharisees came to Jesus, testing him and asking, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any reason at all? Jesus says, have you not read that he who created them from the beginning made them male and female? And he said, for this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife. The two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let no man separate. Yahweh, God Almighty, made them male and female. And by the way, only a male and a female can create life. See, Jesus even mentions divorce in Matthew 19 and 9 and then in Mark chapter 10. And he does so in the context always of man and woman. Never does he mention marriage or divorce in the terms of man and man or woman and woman, right? And let me touch on one topic right quick that was brought to my attention. Another lie from the enemy that people are buying into. I was told that Jesus, the Christ, was speaking of homosexuals and transgenders when he mentioned and spoke about eunuchs in Matthew chapter 19. And what do you know? We just happen to be in Matthew chapter 19. And I was told, and I quote, Jesus accepted the eunuchs into his covenant, and he never tried to change who or what they were, accepting them as God created them to be, David. Please hear me now. Jesus the Christ was not speaking of homosexuals when he spoke of eunuchs. Yeshua, Jesus the Christ, was not speaking of transgenders when he spoke of eunuchs. And see, I'm guessing that the reason that this bothers me so much, right, is because deep down inside, I know that there's a time when I would have wanted to believe this fallacy, right? This horrible, malicious lie. I would wanted to have believed this wholeheartedly. Praise be. Praise be to the one true living God for rescuing even a wretched wretch like me. Because there was a time when I would have wanted to believe this so much, and I would have repeated it over and over and over to everybody I came into contact with. Matthew chapter 19, starting at verse 3. And I'm going to go all the way through 10. Says, some Pharisees came to Jesus, testing him and asking, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any reason at all? And he answered, haven't you read that Yahweh, that the Father who created them from the very beginning, made them male and female? For this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother, be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let no man separate. They said to him, why then did Moses command to give her a certificate of divorce and send her away? And then he, Yeshua, said to them, that's simple. Because of your hardness of heart, Moses permitted you to divorce your wives. But from the beginning, it has not been this way. And I say to you, whoever divorces his wife except for immorality and marries another woman commits adultery. I'm going to stop there for one moment because I wonder how many of us realize how important that term one flesh is. It's very interesting and it's very important phrase because it means much more than the physical flesh. For without the soul and spirit, a man would merely be composed of the dust of the ground. One flesh refers to the physical union of a man and a woman in body and soul and in spirit. And that's to say that a man and a woman become one flesh because Eve was taken out of Adam from his rib. Being joined back to the man, they become one flesh. Yahweh formed woman from man. So whether it's symbolic or not, okay, the rib being joined back to its rightful place, it is what causes a male and a female to become one flesh. And I have to say, look, two ribs, two women cannot become one flesh. Two men, each missing that part, cannot become one flesh. Only a man and a woman, when that woman, that rib is, whether it's symbolic or not, returned to the rightful place, only that makes them one flesh. So after all of this, the disciples said, he just said a whole lot there. I mean, Yeshua just said, look, I say to you, whoever divorces his wife except for immorality and marries another woman commits adultery. So the disciples said, hey, look, if that's the case, if that is the case of the man with his wife, is if it's just like this, then it is better not to marry. And so we see that Matthew chapter 19 begins with the Pharisees testing Jesus. And they ask him about divorce. They're trying to test him, trip him up, right? So they can accuse him. And after he tells them that Moses only allowed divorce due to their hardened hearts, and that is truly only acceptable in the situation of sexual immorality, his disciples said, well, whoa, if that's the case, then it's probably better not to marry, right? So the context is that Yeshua is giving a teaching on marriage and divorce, and his reply was much stricter than what the Jews had been already practicing. The disciples were struggling to get their heads around this whole idea of what the master just said about marriage as a divine institution, and it must be kept without being broken or violated. And so they voiced their opinion that if it's so strict, that if it's so hard to do it right, then maybe it would be better to just remain single. And then Jesus says to them, he says, hey, he deals with it by implying that a man should ask for the gift of God's grace so that he will be able to enter into holy matrimony. And then he goes on to state that there would also be situations. This is where it gets interesting. That there will also be situations which would make it either impossible or inadvisable for a man to marry. And he gives them 3 examples. And we're going to pick up at verse 11. So we're going to read 11 and 12. So Yeshua, Jesus the Christ, says to them, not all men can accept this statement, but only those to whom it has been given. For there are eunuchs who were born that way from their mother's womb, and there are eunuchs that were made eunuchs by men. And there are also eunuchs who made themselves eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. He who is able to accept this, let him accept it. Wow. Look, if you're able to receive this, then you had better receive it. That's what he said. So what he's saying is that some people cannot marry scriptural marriage, right? The coming together of, the becoming of one flesh. That some people cannot do this because they were born with either no sex drive, or which could mean like some type of like physical, mental, or medical defect, right? Or they may have a sex drive, but that it would be inadvisable for them to enter into a relationship of that magnitude due to their own defect or disability or situation or calling. And we're going to get to look at that too. So when Yeshua says that some are made eunuchs by men, he wasn't speaking of what they're trying to preach to the LGBT movement, that it means sex changes, and so he was not speaking of sexual reassignment surgeries. He was not speaking of transgenders taking hormones and all of that. But that in those days, some men that were elected to guard harems of women, that they would have to be castrated. They would have to be castrated in order to be permitted to guard all of those women. And also, castration was also a form of punishment for some crimes as well. And then finally, we see where Jesus says, and there are also eunuchs who made themselves eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. Right? He's speaking of those who chose not to marry, who chose not to have a family so that they could give their total attention, their total focus on furthering Yahweh's kingdom. So physically, mentally, and medically, this last group is fully functional. They're fully, completely able, but choose to remain single. It's a spiritual castration. And given some of the long and dangerous journeys some of these men were about to take to spread the gospel, it would have been advisable for those select men to remain unattached. See, even Paul in 1 Corinthians 7 says that being single is a gift from God. And then he goes on to give the reason for this being a gift. He says that it's so the single person does not have to focus on a spouse, but can give all of their undivided attention to doing Yahweh's will in God's work. Amen. So let us understand that that Jesus the Christ was not speaking of homosexuals or transgenders when he spoke of eunuchs. He was simply explaining to his disciples why there are some who do not or cannot marry. And so let's get back to Yeshua, Jesus the Christ, condemning homosexuality. Because let us also know and see throughout the Gospels that Jesus supported the writings of Moses, which we can see in, if we go to John chapter 5, just verses 46 and 47, where he said, "For had ye believed Moses, you would have believed me, for he wrote of me." But if you don't believe Moses' writings, how are you going to believe my words? Right? And we know that Moses' writings and words clearly showed a condemnation of homosexuality. And that's Leviticus 18:22, Leviticus 20:13. So even though Yeshua, Jesus the Christ, did not specifically mention the act of homosexuality, he did support the scriptures, including its condemnation of homosexuality. And he confirmed that marriage is between one man and one woman. So when you hear someone say, well, Jesus never condemned homosexuality, yes, he most definitely did, just by affirming the God-ordained definition of marriage. Not to mention that God Almighty said that homosexuality is a sin in the Old Testament, right? If it's all one author, hello. Therefore, Yeshua, Jesus the Christ, being fully God and fully man, most certainly condemned homosexuality. And if Yahweh had to repeat himself, right? If he had to keep repeating, stealing is a sin. And by the way, if you steal something, it's a sin. And theft is a sin. The Bible would be like a never-ending set of volumes. If he says it, it is so. The Old Testament is not done away with because there's a New Testament. Even Paul being Yahweh's messenger, right? Yahweh's messenger. Inspired by Yah to preach his gospel, his doctrine, his word. He definitely ministered that homosexuality is a sin, and like all sin, is punishable by death. There's also an audience differentiation we have to recognize here. Yeshua, Jesus the Christ, he dealt with the Jews. The Jews knew homosexuality was a sin. That wasn't an issue with them. Paul dealt with the Romans, who definitely practiced all types of deviant sexual behavior. So there's a big difference in the audience, right? But even that doesn't matter, because the truth is that Yeshua, Jesus the Christ, fully God, fully man, affirmed and confirmed one man, one woman, as they were made from the beginning, and Moses' writings. So I'd also like to mention that we can put to rest this big argument out there of well, he said he was born that way, and he's not born that way. And look, Romans 1:27 says, likewise also the men, leaving the natural function of the woman, burned in their lust for one another, men with men, committing what is shameful, and receiving in themselves the penalty of their error, which was due, which is unnatural. So what is unnatural goes against the natural order of things as created and intended to be. However, stop arguing with people that they're not born that way, because they are. We all are. Whatever that is for you, you were born that way. We are born into sin and we're shaped in iniquity. Born that way? Yes. That's why Yeshua said, be born again in John 3:3. Created in the image of God. Born in the image of Adam. Born into sin and shaped in iniquity. I've heard some wrong things about homosexuality being preached. And listen, I can't even say it like that. What I can say is that I've said some wrong things about homosexuality. To correct them, I'd have to go back and listen to every single video and read every single message, and I'm not going to do that. I'm going to look at the right here, right now, and move forward. A lot of the times that I've said these wrong things about homosexuality is just because they sounded good or felt good, or sometimes it was merely to fit in amongst those who are out there causing a lot of commotion, or maybe those out there that are more apt to support some aggressive fool, which is what I've been in many instances. So I've said that homosexuality is a behavior. I've said that homosexuality is a choice. However, it's more than just a choice, okay? It's more than just a behavior. Because homosexuality is not just another sin. And yes, we all know James 2 and 10 and 11 says, if you're guilty of one transgression, then you're guilty of all. However, homosexual becomes an identity. And it becomes all that they are. And it becomes their very existence. See, when we tell someone that shooting up heroin is wrong, they know that. When we tell someone that alcoholism is bad, they get it. Doesn't matter if they believe the worldly lies that it's a disease or not, right? They get that it's bad. When we tell someone that stealing is a sin, they even understand that. But when we tell somebody that homosexuality is wrong or bad or a sin, then we are attacking their very identity. We are attacking their very existence, who and what they've truly accepted themselves to be. That is what causes the mass rebellion of the youth especially, and why it is so very important for them to be proud of who and what they are. Pride, gay pride, homosexual pride, Pride Month. That rainbow doesn't stand for homosexuality. It stands for pride. And they believe it. And they believe it sincerely and truly with every single fiber of their being. They have accepted this identity as the end all, and the world and society around them has drawn a line that tells them, and they believe it, that there is nothing else for them past that line. The goal must be to seek and to save or to restore. Lord, have mercy. Luke chapter 19:10, Yeshua, Jesus the Christ, says, for the Son of Man has come to seek and to save, or to restore, that which was lost. Our goal should be to seek and to save, or to restore, that which has been lost. Not those. The church is running around. The church is running around out there looking for those that they can seek and save. They're looking for those instead of that. And it's pretty evident that that is the very relationship created, that between the created and the creator, right? The intimacy that we were created to share, not just with our creator, but with one another, specifically, but not limited to, same-sex intimacy. Whew. Lord, please hear me now. We are created with, we are designed with a character or a very distinct nature to same-sex intimacy. Little boys desire this with their fathers and other males. Little girls desire this with their mommies and other females. We've all accepted the great big lie that little boys are closest to mommy and little girls are closest to daddy. Mama's boy, daddy's little girl, all of that stuff we've accepted. This has been tainted and perverted, something fierce by the enemy, by this world, and by the lust of this old flesh. We have been trained, we have been taught that if we have or feel a draw towards something or someone, that it means that we're attracted to them. And that's a lie from the pit of hell. Do you hear what I'm saying? We are created to be drawn to others, to share and experience true and pure intimacy with one another, especially those of the same sex. If we accept something as an attraction, then it must be sexual and or romantic. But what if it's not an attraction at all? What if it's a God-given desire for intimacy with the same sex, right? That would mean that same-sex attraction doesn't exist at all. Hence, that would end all of the futile conversion therapy and reparative therapies being practiced for profit, even in the Christian realm. That would also mean that once we seek and save or restore that which has been lost within each individual, then they would truly be able to recognize true intimacy and see that the void they've tried to fill with numerous sexual encounters and numerous sexual relations, that void can truly be filled without sexual encounters and without the sexual relations. I think of Jay and Jay no longer wanting to be a homosexual because that void was filled within him because of an intimate relationship created with him by another man. And so that void was filled within him. And Nick the same way. And yes, Nick and Jay may have fallen, right? They may have stumbled. They may have stumbled, they may have fallen, but it's at no fault of their own. It is at the fault of those who aren't equipped to seek and to save that which has been lost because they don't even know what that is. And those I'm speaking of are the church. The church doesn't even know what that is because they're too busy looking for those that need to be sought out and saved instead of trying to restore that which has been lost. Lord have mercy. Brings me to residue, right? Residue is not just for the lost. Not just for the lost to discover their true identity, but also for the saint to rediscover their true identity, which is found in Yeshua, Jesus the Christ. It's not going to be an easy process with so many seasoned men and women of God believing that they have already arrived, believing that they cannot be taught anything more, believing that they already have all the answers, because a spirit has spoken to them, or just because they don't think or feel that this is the way. This is the very essence of relational intimacy from the beginning of Scripture to the very end of the good book. And it must be talked about, and it must be taught, and it must be instilled if we are going to ever discover our true identity in Yeshua, Jesus the Christ, and if we are ever going to help and to take part and be obedient in the process of seeking and saving and restoring that which has been lost. Because when these young men and these young women and even older men and women, when they come and they see that this desire for intimacy, that this void that's within them can be filled outside of sexual and relational perversions, it's the only way they're going to have the hope and the faith that they can live accordingly. And that's all I got this morning. I love you guys. I appreciate you. And Lord willing, I'll see y'all in the morning. Peace.